Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Steve Harvey. Let me talk to you today about something a lot of women don't realize they already have power over. It's called matching his distance. See, when a man pulls back, when he gets quiet, when he stops calling like he used to, most women panic. You start asking, what did I do wrong? Why is he changing? Should I chase him? But let me tell you something real clear. When you don't chase, when you don't beg, when you simply match his distance, something very interesting starts happening in a man's mind. The first thing that goes through his mind is confusion. Yes, confusion. He's used to you being available. He's used to you checking in. He's used to being the one with the upper hand. So when you suddenly stop over-giving, stop over-explaining, stop over-texting, he starts wondering, wait a minute, what changed? A man notices silence when he didn't expect it. And that silence gets loud in his head. Then the second thing that hits him is curiosity. Now he's watching. He's checking your socials. He's replaying old conversations. He's asking himself questions he never bothered to ask before. Is she still into me? Did I mess this up? Is she talking to someone else? See, when you stop chasing, you activate a man's imagination. And trust me, imagination can work in your favor. When a woman matches a man's distance, the very first thing that happens in his mind is confusion. And confusion is powerful. Men are creatures of patterns. We get comfortable when things stay predictable. If you've always been the one calling, texting, checking in, or making emotional space for him, he begins to expect that as normal. He may not even appreciate it while it's happening, but the moment it stops, his mind feels the disruption. He starts noticing the absence before he understands the reason. That sudden shift makes him uncomfortable because what was once familiar is now uncertain. See, when a man pulls back, he often believes the woman will close the gap. He assumes she'll chase, ask questions, demand answers, or try to fix what feels broken. So when you don't do that, when you simply step back as well, his expectations collapse. He starts asking himself, why isn't she reacting the way I thought she would? And that question lingers. Confusion sits in his head because he can't immediately label your behavior as weakness or desperation. Instead, it feels controlled, calm, and intentional. And that throws him off balance. That confusion also shakes his sense of control. Many men don't even realize how much control they think they have until it's gone. When you match his distance, he can no longer predict your next move. He doesn't know if you're upset, detached, healing, or simply busy living your life. And not knowing is unsettling. The mind naturally tries to regain control by replaying interaction, scanning for signs and looking for clues he may have missed. This mental replay keeps you on his mind far more than any emotional confrontation ever could. Another layer of confusion comes from his ego. A man's ego often tells him, I'm important. If I pull away, she'll feel it. So when you don't react the way his ego expected, it challenges the story he tells himself about his position in your life. He begins wondering if he misjudged how invested you were, or worse, if he misjudged his own importance. That internal conflict creates mental noise. He may not say anything out loud, but inside, the question keeps repeating, why isn't she chasing me? This confusion can also force him to reflect on his own action. When there's no immediate emotional reaction from you, he has no distraction from his own behavior. There's no argument to blame you for, no drama to shift responsibility onto. All that's left is his choices. He starts realizing that his distance may have caused this shift. And once a man connects his actions to potential consequences, the dynamic changes, confusion becomes awareness. What's important to understand is that confusion is not weakness, it's the beginning of clarity. By matching his distance, you disrupt his assumptions without saying a word. You don't accuse. You don't explain. You simply remove the predictable response he relied on. And in that space of uncertainty, his mind has no choice but to engage with the situation seriously. That's why confusion is the first thing that goes through a man's mind. It's the moment he realizes the power dynamic has shifted. When a woman matches a man's distance, the next powerful thing that happens in his mind is curiosity. And curiosity is dangerous in a good way, because it keeps a person mentally engaged. Once the confusion settles in, his mind naturally starts searching for answers. He begins to wonder what you're thinking, what you're doing, and most importantly, why you're no longer reacting the way you used to. That curiosity pulls his attention back toward you, even if he was the one who originally pulled away. A man's curiosity is triggered when something no longer makes sense to him. Before he understood the pattern, he would show less effort, and you would show more. But when you match his distance, the pattern breaks. His mind doesn't like unanswered questions, so it starts filling in the blanks. He may begin checking his phone more often, noticing the absence of your messages or rereading past conversations. Not because he suddenly changed overnight, but because his mind is trying to understand the shift. This curiosity often leads him to observe you more closely. He pays attention to small details he once ignored. He might notice if you're less active in his space, less available, or more focused on yourself. If he sees signs that you're calm and not falling apart, that curiosity deepens. He starts thinking, is she okay without me? And that question alone changes the emotional balance. When a man realizes you are not emotionally dependent on his attention, his interest naturally increases. Another part of curiosity is imagination. When you start over-communicating, you leave room for his thoughts to wander. He imagines possibilities, some realistic, some exaggerated. He wonders if you've lost interest, if you've met someone new, or if you're simply choosing peace over him. And imagination can be more powerful than reality, because the mind often creates stories that feel more intense than the truth. This keeps you present in his thoughts without you having to say a single word. Curiosity also causes him to reflect on what he may be losing. When everything was easily available, he didn't have to think about it. But now, with distance matched, he's forced to look at the situation differently. He begins to remember what he liked about you, the emotional safety you provided, and the way you showed up consistently. That reflection doesn't happen when someone is chasing him. It happens when he's left to think on his own. What makes curiosity so powerful is that it shifts effort back onto him. Instead of you asking questions, he starts asking them internally. Instead of you seeking clarity, he starts seeking reassurance. And even if he doesn't immediately reach out, his mind is actively engaged. Matching his distance doesn't push him away, it invites his curiosity to step forward. And once a man's curiosity is activated, he is far more likely to re-enter your space with intention rather than indifference. When a woman matches a man's distance, another deep shift happens in his mind. He begins to evaluate her value. This is not an emotional evaluation at first, it's a mental one. Men are wired to assess what something is worth based on effort, boundaries, and consequences. When you stop overgiving and stop compensating for his lack of effort, he starts to notice the contrast. He realizes that your presence in his life was not automatic, it was intentional. And that realization changes the way he sees you. At first, this evaluation may come quietly. He thinks back to how much access he had to you before. Your time, your energy, your emotional availability was consistent. When you match his distance, that access becomes limited. Limited access creates value. It forces him to recognize that you are not just an option waiting around, but a woman with standards. And standards, whether a man admits it or not, demand respect. He begins to compare you to past experiences. Men subconsciously rank emotional connections, even if they never say it out loud. When he sees that you didn't beg, argue, or emotionally collapse when he pulled away, you stand out. He starts to understand that not every woman would respond this way. Many would chase. Many would try to prove themselves. But you didn't. That difference places you in a higher category in his mind. This is also the moment when he realizes your silence is not punishment, it's self-respect. And self-respect signals emotional maturity. A man may ignore words like "I know my worth," but he cannot ignore behavior that demonstrates it. Matching his distance shows that you are willing to walk away from imbalance instead of tolerating it. That makes him question his own effort level. He starts asking himself whether he's been giving enough or if he's been taking you for granted. During this evaluation, he also looks at how you made him feel. Men often don't process emotions in real time. They feel them later, in absence. When you create space, he starts noticing the emotional gap you've left behind. He remembers the comfort, the support, the understanding you brought into his life. And now that it's not freely available, its importance becomes clearer. What's critical here is that this evaluation leads to honesty. Not always spoken honesty, but internal honesty. He either admits to himself that you are valuable and worth stepping up for, or he realizes he's not ready to meet you at your level. Either way, the truth surfaces. Matching his distance removes illusions and removes the fantasy that he can give half effort and still receive full access to you. In that mental evaluation, you are no longer just reacting to him. You are defining the relationship standard. And once a man truly evaluates your value through your actions, he cannot unsee it. Even if he chooses not to rise to the occasion, the respect remains. Because a woman who knows when to step back teaches a man exactly what she is worth without ever having to say it. When a woman matches a man's distance, one of the strongest emotions that can surface in his mind is the fear of loss. This fear doesn't appear immediately for every man, but for the one who genuinely cares, it hits quietly and then grows. At first, he may try to ignore the feeling. He tells himself that everything is fine, that you'll come back around, that this is temporary. But as time passes and your energy remains consistent, the reality starts to settle in. You are no longer waiting, and that realization changes everything. Fear of loss begins when a man recognizes that his place in your life is no longer guaranteed. Before, he may have believed he could come and go emotionally without consequences. Your attention felt stable, almost permanent. When you match his distance, that sense of security disappears. He starts to understand that access to you requires effort, presence, and intention. And losing easy access to something valuable creates discomfort in the mind. This fear is closely tied to uncertainty. He doesn't know where he stands anymore. He doesn't know if you're still emotionally open to him or if you're slowly closing that door. That uncertainty forces him to imagine life without you in it. And it's often in imagination that loss feels most real. He begins to picture you moving on, being happy, being fulfilled without him. That image can be unsettling, especially if he once assumed you would always be there. As fear of loss grows, his perspective shifts. Instead of focusing on what he wants in the moment, he starts thinking about long-term consequences. He reflects on what he would actually be losing, not just a relationship, but the way you made him feel, the consistency you offered, the emotional safety you provided. These realizations don't happen when a woman is chasing him. They happen when he's faced with the possibility that she might truly walk away. This fear can trigger two very different responses, and this is where clarity comes in. A man who values you and is capable of growth will feel motivated by this fear. He will begin to move closer, communicate more clearly, and show effort. Not because he was pressured, but because he chose to protect what matters to him. On the other hand, a man who is emotionally unavailable may retreat further. But even in retreat, the truth is revealed. The fear exposed his limits. What's important to understand is that fear of loss is not manipulation. It's a natural emotional response to boundaries. You didn't threaten. You didn't demand. You simply showed that you are willing to honor yourself. That alone is enough to wake a man up emotionally. Matching his distance tells him that your presence is a privilege, not a guarantee. And once a man truly feels the possibility of losing you, he can no longer take you for granted. Whether he steps forward or steps away, the power has shifted back to where it belongs with a woman who knows her worth and is not afraid to protect it. When a woman matches a man's distance, the final and most important thing that goes through his mind is decision. Everything before this, confusion, curiosity, evaluation, And fear of loss leads to this moment. A man cannot stay in mental uncertainty forever. At some point, he must choose what role he wants to play in your life. Matching his distance removes comfort and forces clarity. It pushes him to act instead of drift. This decision is not about promises or words, it's about behavior. When you no longer chase, explain, or overextend, you stop carrying the emotional weight of the connection alone. That weight falls back onto him. He begins to feel the responsibility of either stepping up or stepping away. And that responsibility can no longer be avoided. Your consistency in matching his distance tells him that half effort will no longer work. For a man who truly values you, this is the moment he reflects deeply. He asks himself whether he's ready to meet you with the same level of energy, respect, and intention. He considers what it would take to rebuild closeness and whether he's willing to do that work. If the answer is yes, his actions change. He reaches out with purpose. He communicates more clearly. He shows up differently because he understands that access to you must now be earned, not assumed. For a man who is not Ray, the decision still happens, but in a different way. He may choose to remain distant or fade away completely. And while that can be painful, it is also revealing. Matching his distance exposes reality without drama. It shows you exactly where he stands. Instead of wasting time in confusion, you receive the truth through his lack of action. And truth, even when it hurts, is a form of protection. This decision-making process also affects how he sees you long term. Even if he chooses not to step up, he recognizes that you are a woman who honors her boundaries. That awareness leaves an imprint. He understands that you are not someone who can be emotionally strung along. You become a reference point for what emotional strength and self-respect look like. And that respect often lingers even after the connection ends. What makes this final stage powerful is that you did not force the outcome. You didn't argue, threaten, or manipulate. You simply aligned your energy with his. In doing so, you gave him the space to reveal his intentions. The decision he makes is entirely his, and that's what makes it honest. Matching his distance is not about winning him back. It's about choosing yourself. And when you choose yourself, you invite the kind of love that chooses you back just as intentionally.